You reheated last night's leftovers this morning without thinking twice about it. You've done it 1,000 times, most people have, and for almost everything in your fridge, that's completely fine. But there are a small number of foods where the reheating step itself, not the original cooking, the second heating changes the chemistry of what's on your plate. Most people have been told that reheating is just about killing bacteria and making sure the food is hot enough. That's true, and it matters. But it leaves out a separate issue entirely. Some foods produce new compounds when they're heated a second time, and a few of those compounds are ones we have real, published reasons to take seriously. I want to be upfront about something. Nothing in this video is about a single meal ruining your health. This is about patterns, habits repeated over years, because that's actually how dietary cancer risk works in the research. There's no dramatic conspiracy here. Food safety guidance on reheating gets buried in dense agency reports that almost nobody reads outside of food science departments. So I want to walk through it in plain language. Before we get into it, tell me in the comments how often you reheat leftovers during a normal week. I read these, and it shapes what I cover in future videos. Let's start at number 4. Number 4. Leafy green vegetables, spinach, chard, beet greens. Most people think of spinach as one of the safest things in your fridge to reheat. It's a vegetable. It's healthy. What could go wrong? Here's the part that surprises people. Leafy greens like spinach and chard are naturally high in nitrates, which they absorb from soil and fertilizer. That's not dangerous by itself. Nitrates are in a lot of vegetables, and vegetables overall are protective, not risky. The issue is specifically about what happens when those nitrate-rich greens are reheated or kept warm for extended periods. Bacteria, including bacteria naturally present on the food, can convert those nitrates into nitrites, and when nitrites are then exposed to heat in the presence of amino acids, which are everywhere in food, including in the greens themselves, they can convert further into compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines matter because several of them are classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as probably carcinogenic to humans, and food safety researchers have specifically flagged leafy greens as a category where reheating rather than the original cooking is the step of concern. Food safety guidance from European nitrate monitoring organizations specifically recommends not reheating spinach and chard and removing the stems before storage, since the stems concentrate the highest nitrate levels. Think of it like a chain reaction that only completes if you give it the right conditions and enough time. The nitrate sitting in the spinach leaf is like a key sitting in a drawer, harmless on its own. Bacteria are what turn that key into a nitrite, and heat is what turns the unlocked door into an actual nitrosamine. Skip any one of those steps, keep the spinach cold, eat it fresh, or don't let bacteria have time to act, and the chain never completes. This connects to something researchers already understand well. Aging changes how our bodies handle compounds like this. Reduced stomach acid, which becomes more common after 60, changes gut bacterial populations in ways that can affect how nitrates and nitrites interact once food is eaten. One more reason this isn't just a cook it and forget it issue for older adults specifically. In my practice, I've had patients who batch cook a big pot of greens on Sunday and reheat portions across the whole week, a completely reasonable, sensible thing to do for time management. The simple fix isn't to stop eating spinach. It's to portion it before storage, refrigerate it quickly rather than leaving it out, and eat leftover greens cold or only briefly warmed, rather than reheating them repeatedly over several days. If you do want warm greens, here's the sensory version. Fresh spinach wilts almost instantly in a hot pan 30 seconds, maybe less, until it turns that deep, glossy dark green and smells faintly earthy and slightly sweet. That's the version you want to be eating regularly. The leftover, reheated multiple times version in the back of the fridge is the one worth rethinking. Pair fresh greens with a squeeze of lemon. The vitamin C in citrus is a documented inhibitor of nitrosamine formation, which is part of why traditional cooking in many cultures pairs leafy vegetables with acidic dressings. The next item on this list isn't a vegetable at all. It's something that sits in almost every refrigerator in America, and the danger isn't in eating it. It's specifically in how you bring it back to temperature. Number 3. Cured and processed meats. Bacon, ham, deli meat, sausage. Don't let this position fool you. This is one of the most common breakfast and lunch items in the country, and almost nobody thinks about how they're reheating it. Processed meats already carry a nitrite curing agent, added to prevent bacterial growth and preserve color. That's a regulated, monitored additive. The FDA and international food safety agencies set legal limits specifically to keep it within a safe range. The issue isn't the curing itself. It's what happens when those nitrites are exposed to high, direct heat, specifically frying or grilling, as opposed to gentler methods like boiling, steaming, or baking. Food toxicology research is fairly consistent here. High-heat cooking methods accelerate the same nitrite to nitrosamine conversion we just talked about with spinach, and it happens faster and more completely in meat because meat is naturally rich in the amino acids that nitrosamines need to form. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has already classified processed meat itself as a Group 1 carcinogen based on colorectal cancer risk, meaning the evidence connecting it to cancer is considered strong and consistent. What food safety researchers add on top of that is more specific. The cooking method changes the risk further. Pan-frying bacon until it's crisp and blackened at the edges produces meaningfully more nitrosamine formation than reheating the same bacon gently in an oven at a lower temperature. Picture nitrite like a smoke detector battery. It's doing an important protective job, keeping the meat from spoiling. But leave that battery sitting somewhere too hot for too long, and it can corrode into something you didn't intend to create. The reheating method is what determines whether that corrosion happens. This matters more with age for a fairly mechanical reason. Chronic low-grade inflammation, sometimes called inflammaging in the research literature, becomes more common in older adults, and a body already managing background inflammation has less capacity to buffer additional carcinogen exposure without it compounding. I think of patients who've eaten the same breakfast bacon, eggs, coffee for decades, and the bacon habit itself isn't the concerning part. It's specifically that they were pan-frying leftover bacon crisp every single morning rather than gently rewarming it. A small, genuinely low-effort change reheating in a covered pan on low heat or in a microwave with a damp paper towel rather than crisping it hard in a dry skillet measurably reduces that specific exposure pathway without requiring anyone to give up bacon entirely. Here's what that looks like in practice. Reheated ham or bacon should look soft and slightly glossy, not blackened or crackling at the edges. It should smell like warm meat, not like char. If you're hearing an aggressive sizzle and seeing dark, crisped edges forming again, that's the high heat mechanism kicking in a second time. This pairs directly with the greens we just discussed. Both mechanisms run through the same nitrite to nitrosamine chemistry. So a plate that reheats both bacon and spinach the same crisped, high heat way is compounding the same exposure pathway twice at once. If nobody ever walked you through why reheating method matters not just whether food is reheated, but how to subscribe, because that's exactly the kind of gap this channel exists to close. Hit like if this is the first time you've heard the cooking method distinction explained clearly. And if you know someone who reheats deli meat or bacon in a hot pan every morning, send them this video. So far, you've learned two genuinely actionable things. Portion and quickly refrigerate leafy greens instead of letting them sit warm, and reheat cured meats gently rather than crisping them a second time. You could stop the video here and already be ahead of most dietary advice on this topic. But item 2 involves a mechanism most people have never heard connected to reheating at all. It's not about the food itself changing, it's about the cooking medium the food sits in. Number 2, reused or repeatedly reheated cooking oil. Most people reuse cooking oil to save money and reduce waste, a completely reasonable instinct. Strain it, store it, use it again for the next stir fry or fry up. The problem isn't reuse itself, it's what accumulates in oil each time it's brought back up to frying temperature. When oil is heated, especially above roughly 150 degrees Celsius, which is well within normal frying range, it begins breaking down through a process called lipid oxidation. That breakdown produces a class of compounds called aldehydes, including ones with names like acrolein and 4-hydroxynonenal. Research using high-field NMR spectroscopy has confirmed that these aldehydes accumulate progressively with each reheating cycle. Regardless of which oil you start with, olive, sunflower, canola, all of them are susceptible. Several of these aldehydes are classified as mutagenic and genotoxic, meaning they can directly damage DNA, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer has separately classified emissions from high-temperature frying as a probable carcinogen, based partly on elevated lung cancer risk observed in people who fry food occupationally, like professional cooks exposed to frying fumes daily over years. Here's the everyday comparison that makes this click. Think of oil like a sponge that's been used to clean up the same spill over and over. Each time it picks up a little more residue, and it never fully resets back to its original state, even after you strain out the visible particles. The oil that looks clean in the bottle after its third use is chemically nothing like the oil that came out of the bottle the first time. The reason this matters more as we age comes down to something called mitochondrial decline. After roughly age 60, the energy-producing structures inside our cells become progressively less efficient at repairing everyday oxidative damage. Reactive aldehydes add to that oxidative burden at exactly the point where the body's repair systems are least equipped to keep up. I've had patients who fry with the same bottle of oil for weeks because it still looks fine, a totally understandable habit, since oil that's gone bad from oxidation doesn't always look obviously different at a glance. The change I usually suggest isn't to stop frying food. It's to limit oil reuse to once, maybe twice at most, and to smell it before each reuse. Oxidized oil develops a faint, rancid, or crayon-like smell well before it looks visibly off. In practice, fresh oil should be a clear, unclouded gold or pale green, and it should smell neutral or faintly nutty, depending on the type. Oil that's been reheated several times often darkens slightly and starts to smell a little sharp or plasticky. That smell is your simplest, most reliable warning sign, and you don't need lab equipment to notice it. Pairing this with fresh vegetables cooked in that oil, rather than starchy fried foods, matters at the mechanism level too. Vitamin C and polyphenols in fresh vegetables act as antioxidants that can partially offset some of the oxidative load, the same protective chemistry we mentioned with lemon and nitrosamines earlier. The number one item on this list isn't meat, and it isn't a vegetable. It's one of the most commonly reheated starchy foods in the country, and the compound it forms has its own name in food chemistry, discovered almost by accident less than 25 years ago. Number 1. Reheated fried potatoes fries, hash browns, chips. In 2002, Swedish researchers made an unexpected discovery while studying a completely unrelated industrial chemical exposure. They found meaningful levels of a compound called acrylamide in ordinary fried and baked starchy foods, especially potato products. That single finding reshaped food safety research for the next 2 decades. Acrylamide forms through something called the Maillard reaction, the same chemical process responsible for that appealing golden brown color and toasted flavor in fried and baked food. It specifically requires high heat, generally above 120 degrees Celsius, acting on foods that are both starchy and contain naturally occurring sugars, and the amino acid asparagine, which describes potatoes almost perfectly. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies acrylamide as a Group 2 aprobable human carcinogen, based on consistent findings of tumor formation in animal studies and more limited evidence in humans. Here's the part that's directly relevant to reheating specifically, not just original cooking. Multiple recent food science studies have measured acrylamide formation across different reheating methods for pre-fried potato products like hash browns and fries, and found that reheating not just the first fry adds meaningfully to the total acrylamide content, with the amount varying significantly depending on method. Reheating in an air fryer, for instance, was measured in one 2025 study at producing noticeably higher acrylamide levels than reheating in oil in a pan, likely because air frying involves less direct heat transfer and requires longer exposure at high temperature to achieve the same crisping effect. Think of it like toast. The difference between lightly golden toast and blackened smoking toast isn't a different bread. It's the same bread pushed further along the same chemical reaction. Acrylamide formation works the same way. It's not a contaminant added to the food, it's a byproduct of pushing that browning reaction further than it needs to go, and reheating gives that reaction a second opportunity to progress. For older adults specifically, this connects to a concept called anabolic resistance, the reduced ability of aging muscle and tissue to repair and regenerate efficiently. Chronic low-level genotoxic exposure, the kind linked to compounds like acrylamide, is a heavier burden on a body whose baseline cellular repair capacity is already declining with age, which is part of why food safety agencies emphasize minimizing avoidable exposure sources, rather than treating any single instance as the sole determining factor. I think of patients who reheat a big batch of frozen hash browns or fries in the microwave or air fryer nearly every morning because it's fast and reliable again, a completely understandable routine. The adjustment that actually reflects the research isn't to eliminate potatoes. It's to reheat gently and briefly rather than pushing for maximum crispness a second time, and to choose boiling or steaming methods for potato leftovers when texture allows, since acrylamide essentially doesn't form below the boiling point of water. Here's what that looks like. Reheated fries or hash browns should come out light golden, warm all the way through, and slightly soft rather than shatteringly crisp. If you're chasing that deep amber, extra crunchy restaurant texture on the second heating, that extra color is coming from more of the same reaction that produces acrylamide. This closes the loop with everything else in this video. Greens, cured meats, cooking oil, and starchy fried food all share one underlying theme. High, direct, repeated heat is the common thread across every mechanism we've covered today, whether it produces nitrosamines or aldehydes or acrylamide. What we've covered today isn't about never eating any of these foods again. Bacon, spinach, hash browns, and a frying pan aren't going anywhere, and they shouldn't have to. It's about reducing a category of avoidable cumulative exposure that adds up quietly over years, which is exactly the kind of risk that's easiest to overlook because no single meal ever feels like the one that mattered. Here's what you can actually do tonight. Portion any leftover spinach or chard into the fridge within 2 hours instead of letting it sit warm on the counter. Reheat bacon, ham, or sausage gently covered pan on low heat, or microwave with a damp paper towel instead of crisping it hard a second time. Smell your cooking oil before reusing it, and retire it after 1 or 2 uses if it smells even faintly sharp or rancid rather than neutral. And if you're reheating fries or hash browns, go for warm and soft rather than extra crispy, or reheat them by boiling or steaming if the dish allows for it. One specific caution. If you or someone in your household is on a low-nitrate diet for a medical reason, this sometimes applies to infants, or to people managing certain heart medications. Talk to your doctor before making assumptions about which vegetables are safer, since nitrate content varies enormously between vegetable types and isn't something to manage without guidance. A lot of you are probably now wondering whether this means cooking oil itself is something to worry about even on the first use, not just when it's reheated. That's actually a separate and well-studied question: which oils oxidize fastest, and why some are more heat stable than others, and I've made a video that walks through exactly that. I'll link it right here. Have you changed how you reheat food since learning any of this? Tell me in the comments. Someone else watching this might need to hear exactly what worked for you.